Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. On this video I'm going to be looking at Greece in conflict. So this is part one of two videos I'm going to do looking at the time period 479 to 446 BC. So this is the aftermath of the Persian War and the movement towards the Peloponnesian War. And in this video I'm going to concentrate on leagues and tensions. So this is from the A-level ancient history specification for the unit Greece in conflict, and it tells us that we need to know the consequences of victory for the Greek states, especially relations between Sparta and Athens, the growth of Athenian power in the Delian League, Sparta's concerns, and the consequences for relations between Sparta and Athens and the respective allies of the earthquake and Helot revolt 465 to 464 BC. So that's when I look at this. In this one, I'm going to look at the next stage, kind of going on from the early 460s through into 446 in the second video. So we're going to concentrate on these particular elements, in particular the growth of Athenian power and the development of these leagues. So what do we know about the consequences for victory for the Greek state? And again, focusing particularly because we're looking at the development into the Peloponnesian War in the relationship between Sparta and Athens. Well, although the Persian invasion was over, that wasn't the end of conflict between the Greek states and Persia. Now, the nature of the warfare changes. It becomes one where the Greeks are more the aggressors, but the invasion itself is over. Athens' priority is to rebuild their city after it's been destroyed during the Persian Wars, and we see the details of this in Thucydides 1.89. And Sparta were alarmed at this, and they kind of respond kind of negatively about this. We see this in Thucydides 1.90. Now, smaller Greek states sought protection in case the Persians returned, and so they were fearful of kind of continued Persian dominance. Athens and Sparta both sought to consolidate their dominant positions in Greece, having played such a major role in defeating Persia. I mean, in the Persian War, Sparta could point to its military leadership and its seemingly unbeatable hoplite army. And the Athenians could point to its navy and the really significant role that had played in defeating the Persians. Both started building their own leagues. So we see the Peloponnesian League, which kind of predates this but continues, dominated by Sparta, and the newly formed Delian League, which is under Athens. So they're developing their own power bases. They are suspicious of each other. As I've mentioned, the Peloponnesian League predates this period. It goes back to before 500 BC. It had played a very significant part. It had been a big part of the Hellenic League, which fought against the Persians in the Persian War. It was made up of city-states from across the Peloponnese, plus Megara, which is just next to Corinth as you go across the Isthmus of Corinth, and Megara is on the Athenian side of Corinth, so it's in between the Isthmus of Corinth and Attica, and also the nearby island of Aegina. Sparta agreed that it would defend any league member if it was attacked by a non-member. If the League decided to declare war, then Sparta would provide the commander-in-chief and raise the army. So in charge of levying the army, making sure they got all the troops together, both the Spartans ones and from their allies. It was bicameral, which meant that essentially there's two groups that are making decisions and they have to agree. So there's the Spartan Assembly, and then there's a kind of Congress of allied states. Each allied state gets one vote each. The Spartan Assembly decided on war or peace, but then for this to be confirmed, they needed a majority of the Congress of Allied States. So Sparta has kind of got its own kind of body on this, but then there's a separate one for its allies. And so essentially Sparta needs the agreement of its allies before it goes to war, or if it ends the war and goes to peace. Interestingly, Sparta does not extract tribute from its allies, but it would often establish oligarchies within its allied states. And we see discussion of this in Thucydides in 1.19. Now, the other side of this is the growth of Athenian power. So we've got the Peloponnesian League. It's long established and it continues in this period, and that's dominated by Sparta. We get this new league, the Delian League. It first met on the island of Delos, which is an island which is sacred because it's the birthplace of both Apollo and Armetius. And the first meeting took place in 477. There's a bit of a background to this. Is now the Aegean city-states, so the islands and then the states around the Aegean coast, particularly going on to the Ionian coast, needed protection against Persia. Now, the fighting had continued between Persia and Greece, as I already mentioned, and the leader of this continued military action had been the Spartan commander Pausanias. Now, Pausanias was seen as being overly violent and despotic in his actions, and he'd had some success in Cyprus and indeed in Byzantium. But the city-states on the Ionian coast and the Aegean kind of turned to Athens, kind of going, we don't want this guy in charge. He comes to a rather unpleasant end, Pausanias, when he gets sealed into a temple and left to die. But we see evidence and details of why these kind of Aegean states turn against Pausanias in Thucydides 1.94 and 1.95. Thucydides then goes on to tell us about the growth of Athenian power, and he explains that the kind of other accounts, other historians have kind of left this story untold, and it's a really important one. So we start off with the Delian League, with the tribute being paid into the treasury at Delos. So it's not actually going to Athens directly, it will do later on, but at this point. And Thucydides reports there's about 460 talents of tribute that have been paid in. And this is to pay for Athenian ships and the crewing of those ships. Now, to start off with, Athens' allies were autonomous, and the decisions were made in a kind of general congress. But this doesn't last. So Athens, to start off with, again, it looks like a fairly standard league for this point, where you're fairly equal in what you're doing, there's shared money, etc. But we see Athens kind of really trying to raise its head, and as the story continues in Thucydides, so at 1.98, we learn about the command of Cimon. Cimon and commands this army of Athenians and their allies. They attack Eion, which they take from Persia and enslave the population. Having done so, there's Skyros, which Athens colonizes, and there's Chrysitis, which is forced to join the Delian League in 472. We're also told in 1.98 that Naxos tried to leave the Delian League. It's around 470 and was forced to return by the Athenians following a siege. As Thucydides' story goes on, in 1.99, we're told that Athenians requires military contributions and tribute from their allies. And it's not just like a nice ask. They were told by Thucydides that Athens made themselves offensive by applying the screw. They are forcing this out of their allies. They are making them pay. There are consequences if they don't. And increasingly, the allies simply paid tribute rather than making military contributions. So this again feeds into this idea of the growth of Athenian power, because their allies are just handing them money, and the Athenians are building up their navy and their troops. So the Athenian power increases based on the wealth of their allies. Now, we continue with the story, and we hear about Cimon defeating the Persians, the Eurymedon, circa 467. This includes a battle that's both on land and on water, and it includes destroying the Phoenician fleet of about 200 ships. This is a really, really a significant battle, to which on which the sources, actually ancient sources, are fairly scarce. There is a bit more detail in Plutarch in his account of his life of Cimon. We're also told that Thasos revolted against Athens at this point, but was defeated, and the Athenians settled about 10,000 settlers on the nearby coast, just near the island of Thasos. Thasos later appeals for help from Sparta whilst under siege from the Athenians, but help didn't come. This is linked to what we're going to look at next, which is the earthquake that impacts on Sparta, and in the end Thasos ends up surrendering to the Athenians. The Athenians take down the walls of Thasos and extract their kind of their price for it. Now we're told a bit more about growing Athenian power in some of the other sources. So I've mainly concentrated on Thucydides so far. So Diodorus gives us a slightly different total in terms of the tribute. He puts it at 560 rather than 460. Again, generally speaking, on this, people tend to go to Thucydides as being more reliable and accurate. Now, Diodorus suggests that Sparta was divided into pro-peace and pro-war factions at this point, and whether they were going to leave Athens in control of the Delian League, or they're going to kind of step in. This is in 11.50 in Diodorus. There's no mention of this divide in Thucydides. So again, there are pro and anti-war factions in Sparta later on, so it wouldn't be an enormous surprise if it was there. As I mentioned, there's more detail, some of the stuff going on in the life, thing going at this point in the life of Cimon, written by Plutarch, and he's very high in his praise of Cimon as a military leader and his victory at Eurymedon, and also comments that he's like the only Athenian leader who treats Athens' allies fairly at this point. So it kind of fills in a little bit of the gaps, because Thucydides' account is fairly bare on this kind of fairly important part of what's going on. So Athens is growing in power, and it's building up its own league. You go, well, the Sparta's got its own league, the Peloponnesian League. It's much easier for Athens to defend the Aegean against the Persians than it is for Sparta, given that the Athenian strength is naval, or the Spartan strength is its hoplite army. So again, it all kind of makes sense. It looks like Sparta's kind of brought some of this on itself, or Pausanias, the Spartan general, has in terms of annoying the Aegean Greeks in terms of the way he was acting. But the major thing that kind of really pushes Spartan concerns is the building of the Athenian walls. And in this, it's not only the building the walls. I think it's something to do with the actions of the Athenians, particularly the leader at this time, Themistocles, in terms of tricking the Spartans. So in 478, Themistocles does definitely trick the Spartans in relation to rebuilding of the Athenian walls. In Thucydides 1.90 to 1.91, we are told how Spartan envoys go to Athens asking them not to build their wall, explaining the danger of having walled cities. If the Persians then get hold of any of those walled cities, it gives them a base, and that they'd used a walled city base during the Persian wars, and they don't want this to happen again. And they kind of the envoys go and speak to the Athenians, and Themistocles says, "Well, I'll come back to Sparta with you, and we'll talk about it." And he heads off with all kind of due haste, but he says, "All right, and send some colleagues with me." And he says to the Athenians, "Send them nice and slowly, and I'm just going to go and play for time. Whilst I'm playing for time, build the walls." And his colleagues made very slow progress in getting there. To simply delay the Spartans' response whilst the walls were being built. The Spartans heard rumours that the walls were being built, and Themistocles went, "Oh, that's strange. Why don't you send some people to go and check?" The Spartans then send the people over to Athens to go and check if the walls are being built. This causes more delay. And eventually Themistocles comes to him and goes, "Well, yeah, no, actually, we are building the walls. This is why we're doing it." this is what's happened to our city. This is the kind of history between us with the war against Persia, and this isn't something you should concern yourselves with. Themistocles was the man who was responsible for the plan, probably come up with about 492, 493 to fortify Piraeus, and we'll talk about this in Thucydides 1.93, to extend the long wall down to the port of Piraeus to ensure Athenians access to the sea. Now, this isn't actually completed completely all the way through to 458. And Thucydides tells us that in 1.92 that the building of the walls displeased Sparta, though they showed no open signs, but they secretly felt aggrieved because of it, and particularly because they'd not got their way, and Athens wasn't listening to them. This again is one of the root causes of tension between Athens and Sparta, because Sparta thinks it should have hegemony, and Athens increasingly feels that it should. So let's summarise Sparta's concerns. Well, the building of the walls at Athens, they don't want there to be walled cities. Now, part of this might be because they think, well, Persia might get hold of it, and it'd be a really good base for them to then attack the Peloponnese from. Part of it, they might go, well, what happens if Athens then attacks us? And we see this actually played out in the Peloponnesian War. One of the things that Sparta is rubbish at is siege warfare. So a walled Athens, particularly with long walls going down to the coast, giving them access to the sea, is going to make Athens particularly powerful and difficult to defeat. So is Sparta worried about Persia, or is Sparta worried about Athens? Is part of the bit. I'm not 100% clear on this. They are concerned about the dishonest dealings of Themistocles. So again, this idea that Athens is untrustworthy, isn't being straightforward with them. They are worried about the growth of the Athenian naval power and dominance of the Aegean, and again, the money being fed in by the Delian League, making Athens stronger and stronger. There is some disquiet about the way that Athens is treating its allies, and we've seen kind of places not being forced back into the alliance, not being allowed to leave. And this idea of hegemony, that Athens might exceed Sparta's power and influence. So we've then kind of got this last bit we're going to look at in this video, which is the earthquake and the Helot revolt. So the Helots are essentially these enslaved people who are forced to do the kind of the farming and labouring for the Spartans. And the Spartans are always worried about keeping them under control. And whenever Sparta goes off to war, you often get Helots revolts. If something significant happens, the Helots, who are oppressed, in yearly things, actually hunted by Spartans, always take advantage of whatever they can to try and break out. And we hear of an earthquake that hit Sparta around 465, 464, causing widespread devastation, and this led on to a Helot revolt. We're told about this in detail in Thucydides 1.101. And then this goes into then 1.102. The Spartans were essentially struggling against a group of these rebels who were fighting against. Now, Thucydides put this down to Spartan deficiency in siege warfare. And so Sparta has asked their allies for help. The Athenians sent help. Cimon, who was a good friend of Sparta, strong connections with Sparta, headed off with this army to show that Athens and Sparta were still on good terms. Obviously, Cimon is a very able military commander. We've seen that with his victories against Persia. Now, the Spartans dismissed Cimon and the rest of the Athenians, and again, Thucydides tells us that they were fearing the enterprising and revolutionary character of the Athenians, and they might be persuaded by the besieged in Ithome to attempt some political change. So we've got this element of distrust between Sparta and Athens. Well, maybe you can say, well, you can see why with the dealings of Themistocles, but it's also going down to this key political difference between Sparta and Athens, with Athens with its ideas of democracy, and Sparta and more of an oligarchy. What makes the dismissal worse is the Athenians alone were dismissed, and they were simply told there was no need for them, rather than the real reason, as Thucydides sees it, in terms of this fear that they were going to have some kind of revolutionary impact on the Helot revolt. essentially, the Athenians don't believe the reason they were given and are deeply offended and conscious of having done nothing to merit such treatment by the Spartans. So Athens really takes umbrage. They're really upset by this treatment by Sparta. They had simply gone to help. Their help is refused, whilst they say the help of others isn't. And when they returned to Athens, they broke off their alliance with Sparta and allied themselves, according to Thucydides, with Sparta's enemy Argos. They and Argos then make an alliance with the Thessalians, and so we've kind of got an anti-Sparta alliance with Athens at the centre of it now, and obviously all Athens allies from the Delian League. Kind of going back to the siege, which the Athenians had gone to help with, the siege lasted, we're told ultimately by Thucydides in 103 that it lasted for 10 years. After which the rebels were allowed to leave the Peloponnese. They were received by the Athenians, and again, to quote from Thucydides, because of the hatred that they now felt for Sparta. And they were settled in Naupactus. So we can see here that the earthquake and the Helot revolt and the offer of help and the refusal of that offer of help has really soured the relationship between Sparta and Athens, and this is going to lead us into the First Peloponnesian War. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been helpful. This is part of a series I'm building up on ancient history, in particular looking at ancient Greece and the Persian Wars, and then on into the Peloponnesian Wars. So there's going to be an increasing number of videos covering that and looking at some of the sources. I've done videos on Herodotus and Thucydides already. There's also loads of other stuff on the channel looking at other aspects of history and aspects of politics. It's all aimed at A-level students. So this is for A-level ancient history. I've done stuff for A-level history. I've done stuff for A-level politics. So if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe and check out the other stuff on the channel. Thank you for watching.